Minister Ong Ye Kung.
New position. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise in support of the motion. Today, like many members of the House, I'd like to talk about the issue of inequality. Singapore has wrestled with the problem of inequality since the birth of our nation, and it remains unfinished business today. But each country's situation is different. We should unpack the issues carefully so that we better understand our situation, what we have been doing to tackle this problem, and what more we can do. There are at least 4 dimensions to the problem of inequality. First, the income gap in society, the difference between the top and bottom income segments. Second, between the extremes, what is the distribution in the middle and whether we have a strong middle income core. Third, how dynamic or static is this distribution and whether there is mobility, especially from the bottom upwards. And fourth, while accepting that there is inevitable income disparity in every society, do different groups interact well with one another? So to put it simply, the gap, the core, the churn, and the mix. I will go through each. Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I would like to distribute a few charts and also show them on the screen.
Yes, please.
First, let us look at the gap between the top and bottom income segments. One indicator is the ratio of incomes at the 90th percentile to the 10th percentile. I use household income per household member here for Singapore. Compared to countries such as the US, South Korea, UK, and Finland, our ratio is quite high. Last year it was 5.8, you can see on the chart. We are second, just below the United States. But we must take into account the fact that we are a city-state. If we compare ourselves with other major cities around the world, I think we will not be out of kilter. We have been moderating income disparity through policies, especially with a progressive tax system. The top 10% of income earners in Singapore contribute about 80% of our personal income tax revenue. These are in turn redistributed to lower income Singaporeans through schemes such as the Workfare Income Supplement, GST vouchers, higher subsidies for lower and middle income households in education, healthcare, housing, etc. As a result, lower income families in Singapore receive about $4 in benefits for every dollar of tax they pay. Middle income families receive $2 for every tax dollar. This rate of redistribution is higher than the $1.30 to $1.40 that middle income households receive for every tax dollar in UK, US, and Finland. So our redistribution rate is actually higher. What is equally important is that high income earners also give back to society through philanthropy. Throughout our history, we have been blessed with successful businessmen and philanthropists, people like Lim Nee Soon, Tan Kah Kee, Syed Muhammad Alsagoff, Govindasamy Pillay. This giving spirit is still very much alive today, and we must continue to encourage it. With the muscle of progressive taxation and redistribution and the spirit of giving back, we can moderate the impact of an income gap. Second is the core. What is more important is the distribution of income between the top and bottom extremes, and whether we have a strong middle income core. The most well-known indicator of income distribution is the Gini coefficient. We are all quite familiar, but it ranges from 0 to 1. The closer it is to 0, the more equal the society. Conversely, the closer it is to 1, the more income is concentrated at the top, and the more unequal the society. We did not compute Gini coefficient until 1980. But we know that in the 1960s, inequality was very high. Then, many Singaporeans were poor, did not have proper roofs over their heads, never attended school. Yet, there were many wealthy traders and estate owners. So one study estimated that in 1960, the Gini coefficient probably was around 0.5. So it's very high, shoot through the charts. But to drive growth and create jobs, we opened up our economy, industrialized, attracted foreign investments. We built HDB flats, educated ourselves. Singaporeans saw their income and standard of living rose. During that period, you see on the chart, Gini coefficient trended downwards, right into the late 80s. In 1997, Singapore was hard hit by the Asian financial crisis. In 2001, the burst of the US dot-com bubble affected us too. In the aftermath of both events, we observed Gini coefficient spiking very steeply. You can see on the chart. Fortunately, the global economy picked up over the last 10 years, and we have seen inequality moderated over the same period. There have been studies which show that GDP growth actually exacerbates inequality. However, as you can see from the chart, our experience is that the fall in Gini coefficient coincided with periods of growth. And the reason is because ours is a model of inclusive growth that benefited the masses, where there is tripartite cooperation between workers, employers, and government, and when there's a belief that we share the fruits of success. We all eat from the same rice bowl. So as a result, you find that when there is growth, we actually moderate our Gini coefficient. Today, after taking into account government transfers and taxes, our Gini coefficient is about 0.36. The red bar represents Singapore, better than the US at 0.39 and about the same as the UK. We are, however, higher than in other European countries and Japan because of their comprehensive welfare systems, a topic that I will come back to later. To measure the strength of our core, we use median household income. In Japan, the US, UK, Denmark, Finland, and many countries, the real median household income either stagnated or experienced close to zero growth between 2006 and 2016. All the blue bars on the chart, very low growth or no growth. In contrast, over the same period, there was healthy growth in median real household income in Singapore, as shown by the red bar. And this is a result of income growth across the board, including lower income segments in Singapore. The strongest evidence of a healthy middle income group in Singapore is our changing lifestyles over time. Birthdays and festive celebrations in restaurants, living in bigger HDB flats and ECs, family vacations overseas, these are not enjoyed by an exclusive few, but by the broad masses. This is not a natural occurrence, but a result of our model of inclusive growth. The challenge ahead is that many middle-income families hope to do better, and for their children to be better off than them. But given the high base we are at, the climb is getting harder. We will still improve, but it will most likely be in steps and not in leaps. We should also not define a better life purely in economic and material terms, but also other aspects of a holistic quality of life, from a more pleasant and greener environment to a more cohesive and caring society, and with a greater pride in being Singaporeans. The third dimension of inequality is churn, or social mobility. The Ministry of Finance has studied the incomes of young Singaporeans in their 30s compared to their parents. 14% of those with parents who were in the lower income quintile when they were growing up managed to move up to the top quintile of income earners when they are adults in their early 30s. This rate is much higher than the 7.5% in the US, 9% in the UK, and about 12% in Denmark. This is an important part of the Singapore character and one of our biggest national achievements, that Singaporeans are able to transform the lives of their families over one generation. A major contributing factor is our belief in meritocracy, but public policies play a big part as well. A key one is education. We ensured universal access to good general education, which uplifted the population. We do what we can to remove barriers erected by financial difficulties. Education at all levels is heavily subsidized. Additional support is provided for children from lower income families. Because of that, many students who would have dropped out of school were able to continue to be engaged in their studies. This explains why in PISA, our 15-year-old students from disadvantaged backgrounds perform much better than their peers of similar backgrounds in developed countries, not just in literacy and numeracy, but also in other critical soft skills such as collaborative problem solving. Compared to other countries, Singapore has one of the smallest proportions of low performers in PISA. So you look at the chart, all the way to the right is Singapore, with the lowest bar. That's the percentage of low performers in PISA. In fact, there are no more bars to our right. We are the lowest. In other words, we have one of the smallest education underclass in Singapore. And if we wish to equalize the education outcomes further, we can, and there are two ways. We can first reduce academic rigor across the board so that everyone performs more or less the same. Or we can strive even harder to help those at the bottom level up, as we have done all these years. Our choice is clear. By nature, we are hardworking people, and that is a virtue. We will continue to work hard. We will do what is right for students, support as many of them as possible to do what they like, they love, and be the best they can be. We also provide broad access to tertiary education. Today, 7 in 10 of each primary 1 cohort progress to publicly funded degree or diploma programs. Among students who live in 1, 2, or 3-room HDB flats, more than half did move up to diploma or degree programs. Our home ownership policies played a major part in social mobility too. HDB provides significant housing grants to help Singaporeans buy their homes, with the lower income getting more help than the higher income. So during home visits, and in my constituency we have many new BTOs, and when I do my home visits, I meet many families who have moved out from their rental flats into now a flat that they own with great pride, and often with the help of additional housing subsidies. With new schemes such as Fresh Start and the Tenants Priority Scheme, I'm sure more will follow the path of the 3,700 public rental households who have become homeowners in the last 5 years. But the success of our policies have led to a new set of issues. Families who did well are able to pass down the privileges to their children through better coaching, enrichment classes, and exposure to the world. their children have a head start. For families who cannot move up despite the stronger and better support that is available now, we find their circumstances more dire and challenging than poor families of the past. Social stratification is starting to become entrenched. Let me now turn to the fourth dimension of inequality, which is mix. Singaporeans have always been relatively blind to race, income, and family backgrounds. I used to play football at Bukit Merah Secondary School. I was just talking to Mr. Aspun on this. He also always climbed over the fence and play football in whichever school, I don't know. But I played in Bukit Merah Secondary School legally until my knees got busted. Because without fail, every weekend, Saturday, someone will book the field, open up the gate, and whoever wants to play will just play. And I will always go there, and people living around, other groups will just join in. And there are always strangers amongst us. And then we do Chut Hobe, Obe Som, we divide into two teams, and we just play. Nobody is bothered who is from where and what background. And this is really the relaxed Singapore way of life. This culture is organic, but it's also carefully nurtured and reinforced. At least 3 public policies play a part in doing so. First is, again, housing. Every precinct or community is planned with a range of housing types, so that every estate has a good mix of Singaporeans from different backgrounds. We meet one another along neighborhood coffee shops, hawker centers, community centers. Our playgrounds is getting better and better and more interesting. And we see really kids from all backgrounds with parents and grandparents in tow playing together. But we do not stop at hardware. People's Association and other community organizations hold many activities to encourage communal interactions and forge bonds. Second is national service, or NS. It is a universal rite of passage for every Singaporean male. Everyone trains, eats, sleeps together. NS is not just a security apparatus, but also an important national institution, which fosters social mixing at different stages of our lives. And third, the education system. The great majority of primary schools in Singapore have students from all socio-economic levels. Over 80% of our schools have a relatively balanced mix of students from top and bottom socio-economic quintiles. So at least 5% of their students from each of these 2 quintiles. And children being children, they will play and learn together. But we can do better, and we should, and we will. There is a perceptible reduction in social mixing in recent years. The study by the Institute of Policy Studies on the nascent class divide has often been cited. Mr. Ong Ye Kung mentioned that too yesterday. So some schools, due to their history, culture, or program offerings, have large proportions of students from higher income groups. That has raised concerns, and a few principals have pointed that out in their public comments and speeches over the years. People are free to choose their friends and who they want to be with, but when groups are predominantly formed along socio-economic status, whether one is rich or poor, it is the start of stratification, and that will poison society over time. Our policies will need to work against this trend to actively bring Singaporeans of all backgrounds together. So let me summarize after I go through gap, core, churn, mix. In many developed countries, inequality has been characterized by stagnation of wages and economic opportunities for the masses. Median income stayed still. There is a growing underclass. In Singapore, our median income is still rising. Low and middle income families continue to experience real income growth and social mobility. Singaporeans have been enjoying a rising standard of living and are motivated to do well. This is both a result of our culture, who we are, as well as public policies. But transforming from third world to first has created new problems and new forms of inequalities. So first, a rising middle class which aspires to do even better. But material progress is getting increasingly difficult given our high base. Second, some low-income families find it difficult to uplift themselves, and stratification risk becoming entrenched. And third, some amongst a higher income segment are becoming socially distant from the rest. And these are our three inequality problems. Some think that universal welfare can be a solution to all these problems. Universal welfare, what does it mean? It means making assistance broadly and easily accessible to not just the lower income, but also the middle income. Proponents argue that with universal welfare, there will be no stigma associated with social assistance, and the dignity of the low income will be preserved. A few countries have implemented universal welfare, but make no mistake, no handout is actually free. Someone has to pay for it. To support universal welfare, taxes need to go up. For these countries, average income tax on a typical worker is about 30%. GST is typically 20 to 25%. In Singapore, half of our population do not pay personal income tax, do not pay personal income taxes, and GST is still single digit. If we want universal welfare, taxes on ordinary folks, including the middle income, will have to be much higher. But the greater concern is the impact on motivation. And I noticed yesterday Mr. Pritam Singh also alluded to it, and that is a concern that should not be dismissed. So a few weeks ago, in the public dialogue, I called for views and suggestions on how we can better tackle inequality. And I thank everyone who contributed and wrote to me. One young man left a comment on my Facebook page. His name is Chi Kian, and he's now a teacher. His father was a taxi driver, his mother a cleaner. And he said, I quote, "I benefited from the meritocratic system in Singapore. I worked hard through the education system to achieve what I am today. However, I noticed that it is getting harder for poorer students to break through the system like the past, as privileged kids garner many advantages since young and stay ahead. We need to bridge the gap between the rich and the underprivileged through education so that more Singaporeans are able to succeed through working hard." This is a young man who clearly empathizes with the challenges of the low income. But his solution was for the system to enable people to help themselves, not welfare. What's the difference? We make help available to them, but we also preserve their motivation so that they continue to strive instead of being passive recipients of welfare. Members of this House have worked with low-income families week in, week out, and you understand their plight. Others outside of this House might have read about them and their plight. But let's not forget the ethnographies of those like Chi Kian, who worked hard and bounced back, thanks to the social trampoline we have. The government must continue to extend assistance to the disadvantaged, and it will. But making handouts easy and unconditional is not dignity. Self-reliance is. What can we do in the next phase, especially for education, and how should we do it? The phrase "bold changes" in the President's address received a lot of attention. While we should be bold, we should not be reckless. For this will undo what had worked, undermine the fundamentals of our system, and all this has helped serve our students well over the years. Let's not undermine that. We must be bold and we must be wise. To do this, we need to put our ears close to the ground, listen to the voices of all segments of Singaporeans. And if we listen close enough, we will also realize that the voice of the people does not deliver a singular message. Rather, it offers a diversity of views, conflicting and complex, even as they remain compelling. Take, for example, the call for streaming to be abolished. The argument is that it will remove the label and the stigma of the normal streams. But we also need to put ourselves in the students' shoes. We cannot assume the students all want to be in the express stream. Some prefer the pace of learning in the normal streams. Many students will tell you, and I'm sure they used to tell Minister Ng Chi Ming when he visits them, they will tell you they prefer to be a big fish in a smaller pond rather than a small fish in a bigger pond. Many students in the normal technical course also like the more applied and hands-on curriculum, which they feel plays to their strengths. So we cannot ignore how these students feel. Remember, stigma is not an education policy, but a result of our own attitudes and biases. There is also the call for PSLE to be abolished, one of the hot favorites. So that way we take away the stress and the unfairness, because those from better family backgrounds can afford additional help and prepare their children better for their examinations, and therefore abolish PSLE. But if you speak to enough parents, you will also realize that many support the PSLE system, because the PSLE experience teaches their children to work hard and to demonstrate what they have learned throughout primary school years. Many parents are also not overly stressed by it, because they don't see PSLE as an exercise to chase for high marks, but rather as an objective and transparent way to decide which secondary schools their children will go to. And for many families from humble background, for many students from humble background, for them PSLE is their way of doing well and go to a school of their choice. The alternative, which is to go by residential location, is even more unfair. From 2021, we will replace PSLE T-score system with wider achievement levels. With this change, we will not differentiate students so finely for secondary 1 posting. If the scores are no longer so fine, how do we then allocate secondary school places? For students with the same scores, we will use tiebreakers. Citizenship first, then your choice, and finally, all else fail, we ballot. I'm confident that this will reduce the stress of students and help them enjoy learning more. This is a big step change, and it is coming in 3 years' time. We also heard many considered views and arguments on how we can improve the education system, better help the disadvantaged, and we have acted on them. We will see results in the coming years. One strong view over the years, and resulted in a consensus, is that one of the best ways to help children from lower income families is through quality preschool education. These are their formative years, and will have lasting impact. We have been growing the capacity and quality of the preschool sector, including introducing MOE kindergartens, where 1/3 of the places are set aside for children from low-income families. At MOE kindergartens, children don't study and get trained academically. Instead, they learn through play and conversations. And through these activities, they develop confidence, social skills, as well as a foundation in literacy and numeracy. We heard the voices of people such as Ms. Denise Phua, who has always championed a program-based rather than class-based approach to cater to different learning needs and interests of students. And so we are ensuring more porosity between such classes and streams. For students in the normal stream, we introduced subject-based banding, where they can attend certain classes together with students in the express stream. We introduced the Polytechnic Foundation program, where good performing students in normal streams can articulate directly to polytechnics, and they did very well. I think more can be done in this area. We received so much feedback about stress in the system and too much rote learning. So over the years, our curriculum and pedagogies have continuously evolved and changed. Non-essential curriculum was cut down drastically. Long gone are the days where children are expected to do well just by memorization. Today, primary school students face their first examinations only at the end of primary 2. We embedded 21st century skills, which are critical soft skills, into the curriculum. The way higher education is being delivered in IT, polytechnics, and universities have also been drastically transformed. It is nothing like what parents remember them to be. We have also put in place more help for the young from vulnerable families. Kids Start builds all-round support for these children. The Ministry of Social and Family Development has roped in social workers, counselors, nurses, pediatricians, educators to provide holistic support to these children. The target is to help 1,000 children over a period of 3 years. That's the pilot program duration. In lower primary, we will continue our efforts, including through the Learning Support Program and through the program which is conducted in small groups of 8 to 10, we dedicate resources to help weaker students. This is why even though our student-to-teacher ratio is at the levels of other developed countries, MOE has refrained from implementing a general reduction in form class sizes. Smaller form classes across the board can be beneficial to students, but it will deprive weaker students of the more dedicated support that we are able to provide today. So embedded in our class size practices is also our social compact. After-school environments matter too. Students need a supervised and secure environment to complete their homework, study for tests, seek counsel and guidance. By 2020, there will be student care centers in every primary school. Admission policies greatly affect diversity in our schools. For primary 1 registration, 40 places in each school are set aside for phase 2B and 2C, which are for children who do not have prior direct connections to the school. From next year, secondary schools with affiliated primary schools will have to ring-fence 20% of the places for students without affiliation. We also work with many community partners. The major education and assistance programs are funded and run by government in an ethnically neutral way. Self-help groups come in, complement the effort by reaching out to vulnerable members of their communities and offer additional help. Let me share 2 stories. First is Madam Sharina Tan, a single parent to 4 children. They used to live in a one-room flat, rental flat in Bukit Merah. Madam Tan worked as a part-time clerk, earning about $1,000 a month. Then various organizations, government agencies, ST Pocket Money Fund, public hospitals step in to assist her. CDAC reached out to her, and her children benefited from one-to-one tuition under the Supervised Homework Group Program. Today, Madam Tan is working as a sales coordinator, earning about $2,000 a month. She is the proud owner of a 2-room HDB flat. Her eldest son just graduated from Ngee Polytechnic, and he won an award for the most outstanding academic performance in his course. The other 3 children are studying also in Ngee Polytechnic, another one in IT, and the last in secondary school. All are coping well. The second story is that of Mr. Hairul Hakim Kutibutin. When he was 14, his father passed away. The family downgraded their flat. The mother had to return to the workforce to support the family. She worked as a factory operator and a service staff in a fast food restaurant. Mr. Hairul received help from various schemes, including from Mendaki, Sinda, and bursaries from the Muslim Trust Fund. That helped him complete his studies. And he graduated as the top student from NUS Law Faculty in 2016. And today is a Justice Law Clerk at Supreme Court, very nearby. These are 2 of many Singaporeans whom our system has helped. Finally, one of the best counter against inequality is skills future. If meritocracy is confined to academic excellence, success is defined narrowly as being a university graduate holding a professional or managerial position, then pathways will be limited, possibilities reduced, opportunities curtailed. There is a pertinent question in Chinese, no? 为什么要千军万马过一个独木桥? Why ask an entire army to cross the river using one plank, a single plank? Why can't we have many paths and many pathways to success? In Switzerland, 35% of youths go to universities, while the rest enroll in upper secondary vocational and apprenticeship training. Children, together with their parents, make those choices at a fairly young age, based on their talent and interests, with little or no stigma associated with any of the choices. The society respects everyone. Through Skills Future, we want to help everyone discover their strengths and talents, build the pathways to help them achieve skills mastery through lifelong learning and honing of their craft. We have made some progress. Today, we can celebrate our children choosing to be a coder, cybersecurity expert, chef, event organizer, creative designer, hospitality professional, nurse, early child educator, filmmaker, or craftsman. And they have to undergo the requisite training, not necessarily in a university. This is not the case 10 years ago. But a lot more needs to be done. We will have to develop even more pathways and opportunities within our education and our training system. Employers' hiring and human resource practices have to wake up to this new mindset. Some employers have, and I applaud them. Societal mindset will take even longer to evolve and change. We will continue to improve our policies, and we will not stop at these measures. My invitation for ideas and suggestions remains open. From the multitudes of voices, we will discern that singularity of action, a choice that is right for Singapore, and one which we must explain well, persuade people, and be able to defend publicly. So bold moves need not always be major changes. They can be a change in the way of thinking, a spark to add to the Singapore flame. This has to be supported by an entrepreneurial attitude towards tackling problems such as inequality. We will actively look out for fresh ideas and try out new solutions. If we come across an interesting and promising approach, we will be prepared to consider it, develop it further, run a pilot program, and see how it works. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I started this speech by committing ourselves to tackling the unfinished business of inequality. I do not mean that it will ever be finished. It will always be a work in progress. Today, we may be in a better situation than many other developed countries, but tackling inequality requires ceaseless striving. It was so for the first men and women who sat in this House when our country was mired in turbulence, violence, and uncertainty. Today, we live in an era of peace and prosperity, an era where much wealth has been created, but much inequality still exists. To tackle this challenge, we must once again pledge ourselves as one people, no matter the circumstances of our birth, no matter the luck of our draw, no matter the successes and failures that attend our lives, to create a more equal society. And we must keep working at it. And we must do so by appealing to the sense of unity of Singaporeans, never by pitting one group against another, pandering to the diverse, divisive forces in society. Tackling inequality is not just a long-term challenge for tomorrow, but a national priority today. Fixing this is not the responsibility of any one segment of society. It demands something from all of us, because there is no more vital task than bringing Singapore and Singaporeans together. Thank you.
Mr. Cedric Foo. very much what Minister Ong Ye Kung has spoken about. And indeed, I think when debating the President's address, and particularly this time around with the fourth generation drafting it, it is very important to look forward. And it's heartening to hear what kind of society, in terms of inequality, which is a very, very important subject, that the fourth generation leadership intend to forge out of the future Singapore. And I think his framing of the Gini coefficient, which is often used by academics and all, that society inequality can be just reduced to one number, the Corrado Gini in the 1900s, that if that number is high, it's bad, if the number is low, it's not so good. I think it's too simplistic. So it is heartening and enlightening to hear that he sees it in different ways. The gap is one, but I think also very importantly, how large is the core in the middle? How has it progressed? And when you talk about churn, you are talking about upward mobility. And I remember that in many of the pre-cap discussions that we were involved, that we look very specifically at deciles. We are not blindsided by just one big average number. So it's good to know that such attention are paid to it. So I'd like to know whether, in his view, apart from the gap, how does he see the core expanding? And this upward mobility in terms of churn, I think is very important because it gives hope to society. And the other aspect which he talked about, which is mix, I mean, it really defines the day-to-day experiences that somebody who lives in Singapore in the future under the fourth generation leadership, how is it like as a Singaporean in those years, mixing with people of different socio-economic groups and so forth. So I think I'd like to hear a little bit about this issue. Thank you.
Thank the member for your question. Minister Heng Swee Keat always say when he was former Minister for Education, every problem in the world boils down to education. It's always education's fault. Yeah. But what you ask, therefore, shows that it is really not just about education. The gap always exists, especially for a globalized city-state like ours, but we want a strong core. And you ask very pertinently how we build up that core. First and foremost, as my chart shows, with an inclusive growth model, we grow, the fruits can be distributed, especially under our system of tripartism. So NTUC, MOM, employers coming together is such an important institution that we have. And secondly, the world is changing. Our economic model, how we earn a living for ourselves as a red dot, is also changing. And we must find a model, an economic growth model that continue to let us do well in this world, and which the masses can participate. And that goes back again to Minister Ng Chee Meng's speech yesterday, and how that economic model can benefit us. And while we do all that, continue all our social programs, NS, housing, education, making sure that Singaporeans continue to mingle, continue to feel as one, and I can continue to play football in Bukit Merah Secondary, notwithstanding my niece.